Hello, my name is Colin Maitland. I am a Microsoft Dynamics CRM Certified Technology Specialist. I'm also a Microsoft Certified Trainer, and I work with Magnetism Solutions, a Microsoft Gold Certified Partner specializing in Dynamics 365 and CRM. In this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate how to configure server-side synchronization, queues, and automatic record creation and update rules for processing and converting email messages to cases in Dynamics 365 for customer service. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm using an online instance of Dynamics 365 for customer service, and I'm also using Gmail rather than Microsoft Exchange for receiving and sending email messages. This demonstration will therefore show server-side synchronization configured to connect to Gmail via POP for incoming email and SMTP for outgoing email. This demonstration will consist of the following steps in Dynamics 365. Configuration of an email server profile for Gmail. Configuration of email configuration settings. Configuration of an email template to be used for auto-response email messages. Configuration of several teams and default queues for owning and routing cases to. Configuration of an email-enabled queue and related queue mailbox for receiving and sending email messages from. Configuration of an automatic record creation and update rule for converting an incoming email message to a case, assigning the case to a team, and routing the case to a queue. I will then conclude by demonstrating an alternate approach to creating auto-response email messages, i.e. auto-responses that are specific to a record creation and update rule step rather than to the record creation and update rule. Because for the purposes of this demonstration I'm using Gmail rather than Microsoft Exchange as the email system, there are two important configurations that need to be completed for the Gmail account. Firstly, the Gmail account should be enabled for POP downloads as shown here. Secondly, if two-factor authentication is configured for the Gmail account, then an app password must be created and configured for this account. In this example, I've created a customized app with the name Dynamics 365. A password for this app has then been generated by Gmail, and this must be used by the email-enabled queue mailbox in Dynamics 365 for accessing the Gmail account. I will now demonstrate the configuration of Dynamics 365. The first component to be configured is the email server profile. The email server profiles are accessed by navigating to Settings, Email Configuration, and then Email Server Profiles. Here we see a POP3 SMTP email server profile named Gmail. I have created and configured this as follows. The name is Gmail. The server type is POP3 SMTP profile. The incoming server location is pop.gmail.com. The outgoing server location is smtp.gmail.com. The owner has been set to a user named CRM Automation. This is a user account in CRM that has been created as a user account that will never be deactivated. This user account will be used as the owner of the email server profile, and it will also be used as the owner of the record creation and update rules. The credentials for the incoming connection are configured using the default credentials specified by a user or queue option. The other options are not valid because you can only connect to a POP3 server using the credentials that are specified in the user or queue mailbox. In this presentation, I will be configuring the credentials on the support queue mailbox. The credentials for the outgoing connection are configured to use the same settings as those for the incoming connection. Finally, and very importantly, under Advanced, the incoming and outgoing connection ports must be configured for Gmail as follows. The incoming port must be set to 995 and the outgoing port must be set to 587. Using the SSL port 465 as the outgoing port will not work for this configuration. The second component to be configured are the email configuration settings. The email configuration settings are accessed by navigating to Settings, Email Configuration, and then Email Configuration Settings. Here we see that email messages are configured to be processed using server-side synchronization. The Gmail email server profile has been selected as the default synchronization method. Incoming email and outgoing email have been configured to be processed using server-side synchronization or email router. Appointments, contacts and tasks will not be processed. This option only applies to user mailboxes and to the use of Microsoft Exchange. The email processing options for unapproved users and queues are configured so that only emails for approved users and approved queues will be processed. It is optional as to whether or not these options are set or cleared. In this demonstration I've left these options set. This means that the email address associated with a support queue that will be configured for processing email messages will need to be approved. Finally, I've configured the email correlation options as shown here. By default, the Use Correlation to track email conversations is enabled, but I have disabled the Use Tracking Token option because I do not want tracking tokens to be added to the subject lines of email messages, and I have enabled Smart Matching to ensure that email messages are correlated by subject keyword and recipients. The third component to be configured is an email template to be used for auto-response emails that are sent from the email-enabled support queue whenever a new case is created by the record creation and update rule associated with that queue. Email templates are accessed by navigating to Settings, Templates, and then Email Templates. For this demonstration, I've created and configured an email template named Sample Autoresponse Email Template. The template type for this email template is case. This is important because I want to merge information from the case that was created by the record creation and update rule into the auto-response email message that is sent to the customer. Here we can see that I've included the case number and some other case-specific information such as the created on, customer, and case title into the subject and body of the email template. The fourth component to be configured are teams and default queues that may be used for owning and routing cases to. Teams are accessed by navigating to Settings, Security, and then Teams. For this demonstration, I've configured 4 teams and their related default queues. The first 3 teams are named Sales Support, Service Support, and Marketing Support. The default queues associated with these first 3 teams are not configured for processing emails. Therefore, they will not have any related record creation and update rule. They will be used, however, for routing cases too. The 4th team is simply named Support. Unlike with the first 3 teams, the default queue associated with the support team will be configured for processing incoming and outgoing email messages and will have an associated record creation and update rule. This record creation and update rule will be configured to convert incoming email messages to cases, assign those cases to one of the 4 teams, and also route those cases to the default queue of the team to which they have been assigned. Here is the configuration of the support team. Here we see that the name of the team is simply Support. The administrator is a selected user, in this case myself. The team type is Owner. Very importantly, because the teams in this demonstration need to be the owner of cases assigned to them by the record creation and update rule to be associated with this particular team's default queue, at least one security role that provides read and write privileges for cases must be assigned to each of these teams. For this demonstration, I've assigned the Customer Service Representative security role to each of the teams. In addition, if you want users to be able to access and work with the cases owned by these teams, you may need to add them as team members. Whether or not this is required depends on the configuration of the security roles assigned to each user with respect to the access level that they have for cases, and also the business unit to which each user belongs compared to the business units to which the teams belong. Finally, for consistency of the overall configuration, I have renamed the default queue for each of the teams by removing the enclosing angle brackets from the name of the queue so that the queue name is the same as the team name, in this case, support. In this configuration, the names of the teams, their associated default queues, and any record creation and update rule associated with a queue are the same, i.e. the name of the default queue for the support team is support, and the name of the record creation and update rule to be associated with this queue will also be support. The fifth component to be configured are the queues that will be used for routing cases to, and the queue that will be used for processing incoming and outgoing email. Queues are accessed by navigating to Settings, Service Management, and then Queues. As previously mentioned, I'm using the renamed default queues of the previously created and configured teams. It is important to configure whether or not these queues are private or public. This will affect users' access to the queues to view and work with the queue items for the cases that have been routed to each queue. Because I've used the default queues for each of the teams I created, these are by default private queues. For ease of administration, I've reconfigured each of these queues to be public queues. This means that users do not need to individually be added to these queues as queue members. Under certain scenarios, however, it is beneficial for selected queues to be configured as private queues. In these cases, in order for users to access the queues in addition to the cases that have been routed to those queues, they need to be added to the queue as queue members. Only the support queue is configured for processing email messages. This queue will be associated with the email address of the Gmail account that was previously configured for this demonstration. As previously mentioned, this queue will be configured to have an associated record creation and update rule that will be configured to convert incoming email messages to cases, assign those cases to one of the teams, and also route those cases to the default queue of the team to which it has been assigned. I will now open the support queue. Here we see that the type as previously mentioned is public. The incoming email is the email address of the Gmail account I'm using for this demonstration. It is very important that when this email address is added or is subsequently updated, that it is then approved using the Approve Email button on the command bar. If not approved, then the server-side synchronization will not process email messages from or to this queue. This is because of the email processing unapproved users and queues settings in the Dynamics 365 email configuration settings. The owner of this queue is the support team. Under email settings, there are two very important options that, in addition to the incoming email address, are configured only for the support queue. These are the option that determines which email messages are to be converted to cases and the configuration of the related mailbox. I have retained the option for all email messages to be converted to cases. Other options include email messages in response to Dynamics 365 email, email messages from Dynamics 365 leads, contacts and accounts, and email messages from Dynamics 365 records that are emailed enabled. If I choose any of those options other than the All Email Messages option, then any email messages that do not meet the criteria defined by the selected option will not be added to the queue by the server-side synchronization process. We will now look at the configuration of the mailbox associated with this email-enabled queue. The queue mailbox record may be opened by clicking the mailbox hyperlink on the form, or by clicking the Open Mailbox button on the command bar. As with the queue, I have renamed the mailbox by removing the enclosing angle brackets from the name so that the mailbox name matches the queue name and the owning team name, in this case support. Here we see that the email address is that of the associated email enabled queue. If we set or update the email address on the mailbox, Dynamics 365 will ensure that the incoming email address on the related queue is also updated and vice versa. Again, if setting or updating the email address from either location, you will need to use the Approve Email button on the command bar to approve the email address. The owner is the support team. This is the same as the owner of the support queue. The Delete Email After Processing option determines whether or not the emails received from the corresponding email system are deleted after they have been converted to an email activity in Dynamics 365. In this case, I've chosen not to delete the emails from the email system. However, in production systems, you should consider setting this to yes. Under Credentials, the Allow to Use Credentials for Email Processing option is set to yes. The username is set to the Gmail account sign-in name, and the password is set to the app-specific password that was configured in Gmail. It is important to remember that if using two-factor authentication in Gmail, you will need to create and use an app-specific password in Gmail for use here. Under Synchronization method, the Gmail email server profile has been selected as the synchronization method. Incoming email and outgoing email have been configured to be processed using server-side synchronization or email router, and the Appointments, Contacts and Tasks option is grayed out because it is not applicable. It is now important that you test and enable the mailbox using the Test and Enable Mailbox button on the command bar. This will test the configuration of the mailbox. This test may take a minute or two to complete. The results of the test are displayed in several locations. Two of these locations are under Configuration Test Results on the Mailbox form and under Alerts in the Related Records area on the Mailbox form. Here we can see that the test for incoming and outgoing email have succeeded, and that the test for appointments, contacts and tasks is not applicable. The sixth and final component to be configured is the Record Creation and Update rule for the email-enabled support queue. Record Creation and Update rules are accessed by navigating to Settings, Service Management, and then Automatic Record Creation and Update rules. They may also be accessed by navigating to and opening an email-enabled queue. They are located in the Record Creation and Update Rules section on the queue form. From the queue form, the Record Creation and Update rule may be opened by clicking the hyperlink for the rule in the corresponding subgrid on the form, or by clicking the Email Activity Conversion Settings button on the command bar. This Record Creation and Update rule is configured to convert incoming email messages to cases, assign those cases to one of the teams, and also route those cases to the default queue of the team to which it has been assigned. As with the queue and the queue mailbox, the name of this Record Creation Update rule is Support. The source type is email. This is very important. This ensures that this Record Creation and Update rule processes email activity records that are added to the queue by the server-side synchronization process. Other options include appointment, phone call, service activity, social activity, and task. Once configured, this option cannot be changed as it affects the configuration of the Record Creation and Update rule steps. There can only be one active Record Creation and Update rule per source type for a queue. As with the email server profile used in this demonstration, the owner has been set to a user named CRM Automation. As previously mentioned, this is a user account in CRM that has been created as a user account that will never be deactivated. The owner of the Record Creation and Update rule cannot be a team. It is very important for the configuration, activation, and operation of the Record Creation and Update rule that the owner has a security role with approximately at least these permissions. Under Specify Conditions for Record Creation, this record creation and update rule is configured to create a new contact for email messages received from a previously unknown sender, and create a new case for an email that is a reply regarding a previously closed case. Under Specify Autoresponse settings, this record creation and update rule is configured to send an automatic email response to the sender of the email when a new case is created using the previously configured sample Autoresponse email template. This record creation and update rule has 4 steps. An email message will only be processed by the first step in which the email meets the conditions defined in the step. The last step is a default step that processes any email not processed by one of the preceding steps. Each of these steps contains one or more conditions that, if true for the email being evaluated, will cause this step to be used for processing the email. It is important to be aware of the fact that there must always be at least one condition for a step, even for the last default step, otherwise the step will be ignored. These steps also contain one create case action and one or more other actions. In this case, the other actions ensure that the case created by the create case action is routed to a queue and that a note is also added to the case. Here is how the create case action is configured. Dynamics 365 has automatically populated the case title, customer, origin and contact fields. I have manually populated the subject and owner fields. In this step, the subject is set to sales and the owner is set to the sales support team. I have also replaced the Dynamics 365 value of null channel properties for the origin field and set that field to email. This is because I've found that the origin field does not populate at all from the value provided by Dynamics 365. Here is how the route to queue or create queue action is configured. I've set the queue to the sales support queue and the queue item to the case. The queue item value can be configured using the look for field on the form assistant by either selecting regarding from the email, which is the primary entity, or regarding case from related entities to the email entity, or as in this example by selecting the case, i.e. create case from the list of local values. Here is how the create note action is configured. I've set the title to added to sales support queue, and very importantly, I've changed the regarding from being regarding the email to be regarding the case by selecting the case, i.e. create case, from the list of local values in the look for field on the form assistant. Finally, once the configuration is complete, the record creation and update rule must be activated by clicking the activate button on the command bar. Now that the configuration of these components is completed, we will now look at an example of an email being received, converted to a case and routed to a queue. Here is an example of an email in Gmail sent from a customer. Here is the case in Dynamics 365 that was created after the email was received by the support queue, processed by the support record creation and update rule, which converted it to a case, assigned it to the service support team, and routed it to the service support queue. You will notice that this case has 2 email messages associated with it. The first email is the original email that was received from the customer. You will notice that this email contains the word service in the subject line. This is why this case was assigned to the service support team and routed to the service support queue. The second email is the auto-response email that was sent to the customer in reply to their original email. You will notice that the case title has been set to the subject line from the email. The subject of the case has been set to service by the record creation rule. The customer has been matched using the email address from the original email. The origin has been set to email by the record creation rule, and the owner has been set to server support by the record creation rule. In addition, if we look at queue item details, we will see the queue item that was created by the record creation rule for this case. If we look at the notes, we will see the note that was added by the record creation rule. From the customer's perspective, here is the auto-response email that was sent after the case was created, as viewed from their Gmail inbox. Finally, I will demonstrate an alternate method for the configuration of auto-response emails that provides greater flexibility. If we look again at our record creation and update rule for the support queue, this time the send automatic email response to customer on record creation has been disabled. However, a send email step has been added under other actions. This send email step has been configured to use an email template related to the case that was created by the create case step. If we look at the properties for this part of the configuration, we can see that we now have flexibility to configure who the auto-response email is sent from. In this case, it's sent from a queue named Magnetism Solutions. It's addressed to the sender of the original email. It uses the sample auto-response email template as previously, and it is regarding the case that was created by the create case step of the rule. This method allows you to configure whether or not specific steps in a record creation and update rule send an auto-response email template, allow the use of different email templates between steps, and allow you to define the sender of the auto-response email, such as a no-reply sender, in order to prevent automatic email loops from occurring. In conclusion, this presentation has been a demonstration of how to configure server-side synchronization, queues, and automatic record creation and update rules for processing and converting email messages to cases in Dynamics 365 for customer service. This demonstration has highlighted the need to configure the email server profiles, email configuration settings, email templates, teams and default queues, email-enabled queues and related queue mailboxes, and finally the configuration of automatic record creation and update rules.